The scream split the apartment and left the air shaking as Ethan slammed the door, and Ava gathered Lily close, while sirens pulsed outside like a warning that had come too late. Ethan said, "You did this," and the hallway swallowed his footsteps. Ava said, "Leave," though her voice broke on the edges. Lily said, "Mom, please," and clung to her, small and shaking, while the lamp flickered and rain scratched the window. The picture frames rattled, and the cheap lock trembled as if deciding which side it served. Ava tasted metal and fear, and kept one eye on the door and one on Lily. She counted breaths like beads, slow and stubborn. Somewhere below, tires hissed through water, and the city breathed in blue and red. Ava said, "We are okay," and almost believed it as the echo thinned. A mug lay on its side, cooling a dark crescent on the floor. Lily whispered, "Is he coming back?" and the question bent Ava's spine like a weight. She said, "Not tonight," and moved them deeper into the room, away from the memory of his hands. The apartment felt smaller, as if the walls had learned a new shape. Ava locked the bolt and felt the decision click in her bones. The apartment felt like a held breath as Ava gathered blankets and set a quiet island on the couch, and Lily traced a finger along the coffee ring as if mapping a safer route. Ava said tea will help, and set water to boil, letting the tiny sound steady the room. Lily said, "Will school know?" and the question hovered like steam. Ava tucked the plush beside Lily and swept shards into a towel, slow and careful, as if each piece might start screaming. The sirens dwindled to a rumor, and the rain softened to a hush on the pane. Ava said, "We will call Maya," and the decision landed like a small anchor. Lily said, "I do not like when voices get big," and the stove clicked off as if in agreement. Ava filled 2 cups and sweetened both without asking. She tested the bolt again, feeling its sure weight. She said, "Tonight we build calm," and set the cups down, warm circles blooming in the silence. Maya arrived with a knock that tried to be gentle and failed. And Ava opened to a friend whose eyes went straight to Lily before finding hers. Maya said, "I am here," and the words filled the doorway like light. Ava said, "He lost it," and let the truth stand without apology. Lily said, "Hi," and lifted the fox like a small flag. They sat around a table that still remembered better dinners, and Maya's bag yielded tissues, a charger, and a plan. Maya said, "We list what we control," and drew a quick map on a receipt. Ava listed locks, documents, and time, and felt her chest loosen by inches. Lily said, "Can we write bedtime first?" and the map made room. The rain softened to a whisper, and the clock forgot to be loud. Ava said, "Tomorrow we make calls," and Maya nodded like a pact. The apartment learned a new shape that could hold them. Morning found the windows silver with a thin sky, and Ava walked into the office with a spine she had polished in the night. Vivian watched from her glass box and beckoned without warmth. Vivian said, "We need focus," and slid a timeline across the desk like a blade. Ava said, "You will have delivery," and stood without wobble, though the edges of her week were already frayed. An email chimed with the wrong kind of urgency, and the open floor buzzed with polite storms. Vivian said, "Personal matters cannot bleed into this," and the sentence left a cold ring on the table. Ava signed for access and carried the project like fragile freight. She said, "Lunch is fine to no one," and the day unspooled. The city wore its Monday face, and the elevator mirrors kept their secrets. The law office smelled like paper and quiet, and Ava sat while clocks clicked with a patience she borrowed. Samuel skimmed her notes with a pen that tapped at every bruise. "Wow," Samuel said, "we protect the child first," and set a plan in boxes that felt almost merciful. Ava said, "He will fight dirty," and the pen paused as if it understood. The copier hummed like a distant engine, and the blinds drew lines across the carpet. Samuel said, "Document everything," and pushed a checklist that measured chaos into tasks. Ava signed and felt the ink steady her hand. She said, "I can do this," and left the words on the desk like a promise. Outside, the street let traffic move again, and the day opened by a notch. Dawn thinned the night and found Ava building calm from small tasks, and Lily watched the kettle breathe as if it knew the plan. Lily said, "Can today be gentle?" and the steam curled like a yes. Ava lined up crayons beside the lunch and chose the brave colors first. Ava said, "We stack good moments," and slid a note under the sandwich where only courage could read it. The apartment held its silence without fear, and the bolt felt like a steady hand. Lily said, "If voices get loud again," and paused as if testing the air. Ava said, "We step back and call Maya and place the phone where it could be reached." A siren wandered past like weather and failed to enter the room. Ava said, "Tonight we will draw a map of easy things," and Lily nodded as though mapping stars. The kettle clicked off, and the morning opened a small door that both of them could fit through. A framed photo on the shelf caught light and pulled Ava backward to a summer where laughter came easy, and Ethan's grin looked like a promise no storm could bend. Ethan said, "We made it," and the park swelled with bright air. Ava said, "Let's keep this," and the words felt simple and clean. The memory held a picnic blanket and a sky that forgave everything. Another voice rose from a deeper room where lessons lived. Eleanor said, "Choose people who choose you," and the echo braided into the present. The apartment returned with a small ache and a sharper edge. Ava said, "I heard you," and set the photo down as if it might bruise. Lily said, "Is that the fair day?" and traced the frame with careful fingers. Ava said, "Yes," and let the past breathe without letting it rule the room. The school office smelled of pencils and hope, and Daniel met them with a steady voice that felt like a floor. Daniel said, "We can build support and set a plan where pencils became anchors." Lily said, "I get stuck when bells ring," and the words shook but did not fall. Ava said, "We can try a quiet corner," and watched Lily's shoulders ease. Daniel said, "Check in before lunch and after recess," and wrote it as if writing safety. Posters waited on the walls like patient trees, and the clock moved without threat. Ava said, "Thank you," and meant it like a new door. Lily said, "Can I draw during noise?" and the plan made space. Daniel said, "Yes," and slid a pass that felt like permission to breathe. They left with a schedule that fit inside a pocket and felt larger than the day. Dana arrived with a folder that clicked when it opened, and the apartment lifted its chin as if ready to be seen. Dana said, "I am here to understand," and the pen waited above the page. Ava said, "We keep routines and we have support," and showed lists that turned worry into shape. Lily said, "We made a schedule," and held up the pass like proof. Dana walked the rooms with careful eyes that respected edges and counted distance. Dana said, "What happens if Ethan appears?" and the question landed without heat. Ava said, "We call and we step back," and her voice stayed level. The kettle sang again, and the sound bridged the spaces. Dana said, "Consistency helps," and the pen moved like a small metronome toward calm. After the door closed behind Dana, the room settled into a silence that felt earned, and Ava gathered the papers into a binder with a steady hand. Lily said, "Do we still draw the map?" and the pencil waited for direction. Ava said, "Yes," and we add bright stops, and sketched bedtime, tea, and stories like lanterns on a road. The phone buzzed with a message that read like a hand on a shoulder. Maya said, "Proud of you," and the words warmed the table. Ava said, "Tonight is for rest," and slid the binder beside the kettle where courage had learned to boil. Lily said, "Can the fox pick the story?" and the couch made space. The evening held, and the city outside chose to pass quietly. Ava said, "We will be ready," and let the sentence sit like a cornerstone. The email subject landed like a gavel, and Ava stared until the letters refused to rearrange. Samuel said, "It is a motion for temporary custody," and the room paired itself to breath and paper. Ava said, "He is accelerating," and clicked the file while her pulse argued with the clock. The document stacked allegations like bricks, and each claim tried to build a wall around Lily. Samuel said, "We respond fast with records and witnesses," and his tone stitched a path. Ava said, I have the school plan and Dana's notes, and dragged folders into a clean line. A notification from Ethan's lawyer flashed, cold and clipped as winter glass. Ava said, "He will not take her voice," and pressed save as if pressing a seal. The kettle began to hum, and the sound drew a border the claims could not cross. Samuel said, "I will draft tonight, you gather timelines," and the keys began to speak. Lily said, "Is the noise back from the doorway?" and the syllables found her hand. Ava said, "We are building quiet," and the words held, even as the storm pressed at the screen. The office buzzed with curated calm, and Vivian's glass door opened like a verdict. Vivian said, "Client moved the launch to Friday," and slid a chart that bent time. Ava said, "I can stage a workable slice," and began marking dependencies with steady strokes. Vivian said, "No slips," and her smile carried polite weather. Emails stacked like snowdrifts, burying the morning in pings and flags. Ava said, "I will block review at 3, and booked a room that still remembered quiet. She built a list that rationed minutes and refused panic its favorite seat. Slack chimed with a request that ate 2 hours in one bite. Vivian said, "Loop legal on copy," and the loop tightened until it sang. Ava said, "We deliver, and we do not break," and her hands kept moving. Outside, the sky stalled at gray noon, and the day held its breath for the sprint. The cafe was loud enough to hide a tremor, and Maya arrived with eyes that asked permission to speak. Maya said, "He messaged me weeks ago," and put her phone on the table as if surrendering a blade. Ava said, "Why did you not tell me?" and kept her voice stitched to the fabric of the hour. Maya said, "I thought I could steer him away," and the hope sounded threadbare now. Texts glowed with questions about pickup times and routines wearing friendly masks. Ava said, "He used you to map us," and the sentence sat between them like a cold cup. Maya said, "I am sorry," and the apology found no fast road. A bus sighed outside, and the window trembled without breaking. Ava said, "We move forward with boundaries," and pushed the phone back with care. Maya said, "Tell me how to help," and waited like a light that refused to go out. Ava said, "Sworn statement," and no replies, and the pact wrote itself into the noise. Night turned the table into a ledger, and Ava lined bills like tiles that studied her face. The retainer reminder blinked with the patience of a countdown. Ava said, "We trim, we sell, we ask for a plan," and opened a spreadsheet that carried more hope than numbers. A coat in the closet suggested a pawn ticket, and then thought better of it. Maya said, "I can cover filing fees," in a message that warmed and stung. Ava said, "Not yet," and penciled options with a steady hand that refused pity. Bank tabs whispered limits, while the calendar underlined hearings in red. She drafted a second job application that would borrow hours from sleep. Samuel said, "We can request fee shifting," and the phrase glowed like a small door. Ava said, "I keep us afloat," and pressed send on a payment that hurt and healed. The apartment answered with silence. That meant respect. The homework page tilted into a cliff, and Lily's pencil skidded until the letters swam. Lily said, "I cannot make them sit still," and her breath outran the room. Ava said, "We slow the water," and slid a fingertip under the line like a raft. The upstairs radio dropped a heavy beat, and the wall forgot to be firm. Lily said, "My stomach hurts when bells ring," and tears fogged her glasses. Ava said, "We stand, shake, count 5 colors," and they did, naming rug, cup, book, plant, sky. The air remembered how to carry them, and the page became flat again. Lily said, "Can the teacher know this trick?" and a grin tried on the room. Ava said, "I will tell Daniel," and texted a note that wore relief. She added a star sticker to the margin and found a second for later. The night settled, and the future felt brave enough to knock. Dismissal spilled across the playground in soft noise, and Daniel waved from the bike rack where a stubborn chain had trapped dignity and time. Daniel said, "I can fix this," and crouched with a calm that steadied the air. Ava said, "You always find the hinge," and watched the link give way under patient hands. Lily said, "Chalk race," and drew a bright arrow that pointed toward easier hours. Daniel said, "She is brave," and the words felt like a clean window. Ava said, "She learned to breathe through storms," and tucked a curl behind her ear as if permission had been granted. August lifted worksheets and returned them gently, like a small rehearsal for grace. Daniel said, "Coffee sometime, no pressure," and left the sentence where it could rest without tipping. Ava said, "Maybe," and let maybe mean safety first. The late sun made gold of ordinary faces, and the bell forgot to be harsh. Daniel said, "I will email updates," and rolled the bike free. Ava said, "Thank you," and the ground felt less complicated. The post appeared like a stain that would not admit its source, and Ava read the first sentence twice before the room learned its edges again. Maya said, "He is spinning a story," and sent screenshots that glowed with borrowed outrage. Ethan said, "Concerned for stability," in a caption that braided malice with a careful grin. Ava said, "We answer only with documents," and pinned a list that preferred proof to noise. Comments nipped at her name, and then pretended to help. Maya said, "I am reporting this," and the report moved like a pebble into a dark mouth. Daniel said, "School will ignore online chatter," and the policy steadied the door. Ava said, "Silence can be strong," and set her phone face down as if training a wild thing. The kettle began, and the whistle felt like a line in the sand. Ethan said nothing else, but the echo tried to stay. Ava said, "We keep the center," and the center held. The drive letter opened to a clean emptiness that mocked specificity, and Ava blinked at a folder that had learned to vanish. Vivian said, "We cannot afford a slip," and the conference room glass doubled her frown like a mirror that believed in consequences. Ava said, "I have local backups," and dragged a copy into the light with a hand that refused to shake. An email thread hinted at edits made at 2:13 by no one who would admit it. Vivian said, "You should guard permissions," and slid ownership across the table as if passing a weight. Ava said, "Audit log, restore point, then rebuild," and opened a checklist that did not blink. The clock scratched minutes into thinner ribbons, and keyboards hummed like insects in hard weather. Vivian said, "Stakeholders at 4, and the hour nodded toward a cliff. Ava said, "We will make the bridge," and printed mock-ups that favored clarity over charm. The printer warmed to the task, and the room remembered teamwork on purpose. The courthouse smelled like paper that had learned to carry storms, and Samuel set a folder on the bench with the care of someone placing a bridge. Samuel said, "Status hearing only," and the phrase tried to behave. Ethan said, "I request structured exchanges," and stared at a point just left of empathy. Ava said, "Safety and routine matter," and kept her voice on the rails. The judge read without ornament and asked questions that trimmed sentiment to bone. Samuel said, "School plan, social notes, incident record," and stacked exhibits like steps. The order arrived with calm handwriting that made harder news seem polite. Judge said, "Neutral location for exchanges until review," and the gallery exhaled nothing. Ava said, "We adapt," and circled dates that would now learn a new route. Ethan said nothing that could bite the page. The gavel did not fall, but the moment did. Samuel said, "This is temporary," and the word borrowed a thin beam of light. The elevator emptied its quiet into the lobby, and Ava walked until the city gave her a bench that understood. Maya said, "Where are you?" and the phone carried concern like steam in cold air. Ava said, "Outside the courthouse," and watched pigeons practice confidence. Maya said, "You did well," and the words tried to make room in a chest that had forgotten how. Ava said, "I am tired of learning to bend," and let the sentence sit without apology. A bus sighed, and the curb answered with grit. Daniel said, "We will adjust pickup and keep her steady," and the text placed a worn stone in her pocket. Ava said, "We will not lose the center," and the bench agreed by staying still. The sky decided on pale blue, and a draft lifted the corner of the order without taking it. Maya said, "Dinner is on me," and the promise walked beside her. Ava stood, and found she could stand again. The message arrived with a name Ava had folded away, and the room held its breath as if learning a new alphabet. Grace said, "I would like to meet," and attached a street corner that remembered old footsteps. Ava said, "I will listen," and tucked the phone into a pocket that knew better. The afternoon wore a pale sky and a wind that rehearsed beginnings. Maya said, "I can be nearby," and offered presence without pressure. Ava said, "Let me try alone," and felt the choice settle like a key. The corner cafe waited with clean tables and honest light. Grace said, "Thank you for coming." And the words crossed a bridge built from years. Ava said, "Say what you need," and kept her spine steady. The city moved around them with soft patience. A pause softened, and a story prepared to step into air. Grace unfolded a folder as if unwrapping a fragile season, and photographs found the table like careful footprints. Grace said, "I have watched from a distance," and the confession arrived without drama. Ava said, "Distance felt like silence," and let the sentence hold its shape. Grace said, "I kept records after a call I should not have ignored, and slid dates that matched bruised months. Receipts, timestamps, and a note from a neighbor formed a spine." Ava said, "Why now?" and the clock agreed that timing matters. Grace said, "Because he is not done," and her eyes did not flinch. The street hummed with small mercies, and the cup warmed Ava's hands. She said, "This could change the case," and felt a door lift on its hinge. Grace said, "I will testify," and the vow carried weight that did not wobble. The catch sat between them like a small stone that refused to roll. Grace said, "My help means opening what we closed," and the wind agreed by lifting a napkin, then letting it fall. Ava said, "Old rooms have sharp corners," and took a slower breath. Grace said, "There were choices that hurt you," and the past pressed its stamp without shouting. A memory of slammed summers and unanswered doors stepped forward and waited. Ava said, "If I agree, Lily cannot carry this weight," and the parameter held firm. Grace said, "I speak only to the court and to truth," and the promise stood upright. The city gave them a passing siren that faded before it could swell. Ava said, "We proceed with counsel," and texted Samuel a single word. The table cleared its throat and decided to be useful again. Evening moved them to a park where honesty could breathe, and the bench received their weight without judgment. Ava said, "You left when the walls bent, and the words did not splinter." Grace said, "I was afraid of repeating harm," and fear sounded older than both of them. Ava said, "Absence is its own harm," and the leaves answered with a dry hush. Grace said, "I carried shame like a second coat, and took it off one button at a time." Streetlights learned their glow, and the air cooled by inches. Ava said, "I protect Lily first," and the plan stayed steady. Grace said, "I will not ask for trust before I earn it," and the bench decided to keep still. A jogger passed and left no echo. Ava said, "Then we move forward carefully," and the night allowed a small, durable quiet. The apartment table became a war room with gentler edges, and the binder opened pages that finally had partners. Samuel said, "This evidence supports pattern," and his voice found a path through stone. Ava said, "We add school logs and visits, and set each paper into a clean stack." Maya said, "I will sign a statement," and placed her name beside the truth. Grace said, "I will attest to the calls and dates," and the pen did not stutter. Daniel said, "I can confirm school stability," and the calendar agreed. The plan took shape that could hold in court air. Ava said, "We proceed," and felt resolve knit where doubt had frayed. Lily said, "Can we mark the good days?" from the doorway, and a star sticker waited. Ava said yes, and pressed it on tomorrow. The room exhaled, and the future leaned closer without crowding. The dining table became a command post, and Ava stacked binders into a shield taller than fear. Samuel said, "Every page is weight against his lies," and the printer hummed like a soldier in line. Grace said, "I kept tall logs from every month," and her hands trembled only once. Maya said, "Here is my statement, signed," and the paper met the pile like a stone in a dam. Daniel said, School can confirm progress, and his email chimed with quiet proof. Ava said, we will weave it together, and drew arrows that braided testimony with timelines. The air smelled of ink and resolve, and Lily whispered from the couch, you sound strong. Ava said, we are strong, and felt the room steady. The clock ticked like a drum beat, reminding them the fight had a rhythm they could learn. Samuel said, by tomorrow the case will stand tall, and no one doubted it. The inbox flared with emotion that tried to poison the air, and Ava read the lines twice to test her heartbeat. Ethan said, she is unstable, unfit, and his lawyer sharpened words into knives. Samuel said, these claims fold under light, and he underlined inconsistencies with steady ink. Grace said, he never called when Lily was sick, and the truth answered with dates. Maya said, he messaged me while you were at work, and the screen glowed with proof. Ava said, his house is empty of care, and her voice did not shake. Daniel said, attendance records favor you, and the graphs stood like soldiers. The lies frayed at their edges before the printer could finish spitting them out. Ava said, we answer only with truth, and the room bowed to the resolve. The motion became paper, not prophecy. The courtroom filled with shoes on marble and breath that did not belong to anyone. Judge Ruiz said, we will hear evidence, and the gavel rested like a sleeping storm. Ethan said, I seek custody for stability, and his tie stayed straighter than his story. Samuel said, we have records, exhibits, and testimony, and the folders clicked open like armor. Ava said, I provide routine and safety, and her voice carried a line of fire. Grace said he ignored every call, and the dates piled higher than denial. Maya said, he asked me to betray schedules, and the words snapped with steel. Daniel said, school reports show thriving, and the charts gleamed with quiet power. Ethan's lawyer shuffled, and the court smelled the unraveling. Judge Ruiz said, proceed, and the air remembered silence before thunder. The questions curved toward her heart, and Ava stood as if the floor might not hold. Judge Ruiz said, describe your home and routine, and the words felt heavier than they looked. Ava said mornings with tea and maps, evenings with calm, and her chest stayed open. Ethan's lawyer said, what about instability? And the question drew claws. Ava said, I faced storms, and I built walls strong enough for a child, and her tone steadied. The gallery leaned in, and the light caught her profile without asking permission. Grace's eyes glistened, and Maya's hand clenched her pen until it bent. Daniel nodded once, a silent anchor. Ava said, I am not perfect, but I am safe, and I am present. And the truth shone sharper than polished lies. Judge Ruiz said nothing, but the silence bent in Ava's favor. The ruling arrived in words that sounded both merciful and heavy, and the courtroom held its breath as if rehearsing history. Judge Ruiz said, custody remains with Ava Brooks, and the gavel kissed wood. Ethan said nothing, his tie finally wilting. Samuel said, we are finished here, and the papers folded shut with finality. Grace said, you fought with truth, and the relief in her tone bent her shoulders. Maya whispered, you did not break, and her smile finally fit. Daniel said, she has her stability, and the school report closed like a satisfied chapter. Lily sat at home drawing stars, unaware that her world had just been secured. Ava said, we keep moving, and the phrase carried scars and strength in equal measure. The court emptied, but the echo of victory stayed. Morning arrived without a fight, and the apartment stretched like a limb waking. Ava said, we start small, and measured oats into a pot that knew her pace. Lily said, can we add cinnamon? And the spoon clinked like a friendly bell. Grace texted, proud of you, and the words landed softly. Maya said, dinner soon, and the future opened a seat. Daniel said, no rush on anything, and patience drew a circle around them. Ava said, today we file receipts and breathe, and the checklist bowed. The kettle sighed, and quiet settled as if invited. Lily said, can the fox watch cartoons? And the couch agreed. Ava said, we have time, and her voice sounded like a place they could live. The HR office smelled like printer heat and new carpet, and Ava stood with a folder that did not shake. Vivian said, "We value results," and slid a revised schedule that fit like a glove. Ava said, "Boundaries protect delivery," and the sentence drew a clean line. Vivian said agreed, and her tone finally softened. An email pinged with client praise that shimmered without noise. Ava said, "The launch holds," and the week exhaled. She gathered her badge and felt ordinary in the best way. In the elevator, a mirror returned someone steadier. Ava said, "We keep the center," and the doors parted like a promise. The school garden hummed with bees practicing kindness, and Daniel knelt beside a row of shy tomatoes. Daniel said, "We wait for ripeness," and the plants agreed by being patient. Lily said, "I can water gently," and the can tilted like a small cloud. Ava said, "Thank you for the check-ins," and the breeze carried gratitude easily. Daniel said, "You built this stability," and his smile did not hurry anything. A bell drifted over the beds without spiking hearts. Lily said, "Can we name one star?" and a tag became a bright label. Ava said, "Pick a hopeful name," and the garden learned it. Evening gathered friends around a table that remembered stress and chose joy. Maya said, "To steady ground," and raised a glass of ginger ale that sparkled like relief. Grace said, "To second chances," and the words did not wobble. Samuel called in and said, "To truth that stands," and the speaker made room. Lily said, "To stars on calendars," and the sticker sheet rustled. Ava said, "To this family we built," and the room lifted. Laughter arrived without apology, and the night offered seconds. The door stayed closed because it was safe, not because it feared. Night set the city to a hush, and Ava stood at Lily's door with a hand that promised more than words. Lily said, "Are we okay now?" and the question sounded smaller. Ava said, "We are okay and growing," and the phrase planted itself. She crossed to the window and watched the street behave. The apartment held warmth where fear once sat. Ava said, "We are stronger now," and the truth fit. She slipped beside Lily and let silence speak. The future knocked softly and was welcomed in.